Thank you very much and good afternoon. As I said, I'm going to talk about building a shared services roadmap. I just sort of start by saying that a roadmap sort of infers that it's two-dimensional and it sits on a flat page. For those that have done this before, there are many hills, so it's definitely three-dimensional and most of it seems to be uphill. So you've probably seen the short version of RC UK to describe us. I went to a conference the other week where they got the R and the F mixed up. And we're not an edgy French brand selling retail clothes. We are the country's research and development, as has been pointed out earlier. It also says in the brochure that I'm going to talk about a radical experiment. Given where I come from, I don't feel I'm particularly well qualified to talk about radical experiments, although in the early stages of this, one of our scientists indicated that he would be able to redesign Oracle over a weekend. 6 months later, we pointed out this was a business project and could he go back to doing some research. So it's not rocket science, was said earlier. In some cases, it certainly is when you have rocket scientists working on it. So the sort of structure of the talk is about some of the rules, but I'll sort of make a point continuously throughout this. I think you'll find shared services, for those of you involved in it, going to do it or whatever, is all about change. And there's one thing that is misunderstood, is that misunderstanding during change is the rule rather than the exception. So a little bit more about the research councils. 7 independent organisations, as you can see there, spend £3 billion a year on the country's R&D. Jumping to the bottom bullet, the one thing they have in common is they're fighting for the same science budget. That's the one thing they have in common. So when you come to put in a shared service centre, that's the environment against which we're working. Some of the things they do, just by way of sort of tabloid headlines: Dolly the sheep, they found the ozone layer, they did Pirbright, they do DNA surgery or sequencing, and they're very heavily involved in cancer research. So that's the sort of thing. We have ships, aeroplanes, Jodrell Bank, British Antarctic Survey, those all sit within the portfolio. So why are the research councils setting up a shared service centre? The sort of start of it was CSR 07, as we heard earlier this morning, and fundamentally they were told to do it. If they wanted to protect the science budget, they were advised that finding some savings from the back office would be appropriate. Since then, you're probably all well aware of the Smarter Government initiatives, and if you haven't read those documents that came out just before Christmas, I'd strongly urge that you do. It is causing quite a lot of thinking within central government, certainly, and I can't speak the same for local authorities, around how the central government back offices will contribute to the future savings that we heard about earlier. And we anticipate, and certainly the number of data requests we're getting at the moment, which is about one a week, suggests that a lot of it is going into, obviously, the pre-election, pre-budget type thinking. So having been told that they were to do this, the research councils reviewed what they were going to put into the scope of service for the shared service centre. At a very high level, it's HR, payroll, finance, grants, strategic procurement and IT. So they didn't miss much out. And there was a simple reason for that, which is that nobody was prepared to give up anything. Whatever they had, they wanted in the next generation of service. So when you added up what all 7 had, they had basically everything, which in sort of technical terms is called multi-tower, in practical terms is called very expensive and seriously complicated. The technology, for those that like these things, is Oracle 12i and Siebel. It has to be delivered not only to 34 sites in the UK, but also to the Antarctic, Hawaii, Delhi, Gambia, ships and aeroplanes. And we do it all from Swindon, which is obviously a bit of a contextual difference. The plan was that we would deliver £450 million of benefits over 10 years, which if you aggregate that against a 3.3 billion spend every year, you'll see is actually a pretty small percentage in terms of delivery against the total costs. Within that 450, 400 is found from procurement. And of that 400, 200 is found from better sourcing, 200 is found from compliance. The last 50 is found from efficiency, which is basically less people and less IT systems. So, having been told to do this, the first challenge was for them to work out why they were doing it. So, as you can see, it sort of started the wrong way round. And we spent a lot of time in the early days really trying to work with them to get some context for the purpose of the activity other than we've been told. And where we arrived finally was we wanted effectiveness before we want efficiency. And that becomes quite important, obviously, as you're making and looking for decision-making criteria with regard to, are you going to spend on doing something or are you going to take cost out? There are some other key points in the slide which I'll pick up on later. Governance in particular is critical. I guess most of us live in sort of vertical silos, and the very clue of shared services is you have to share. Therefore, in our 7 vertical silos, we were introducing one horizontal, which was trying to bring those 7 together. The expression herding cats springs to mind. Within that governance, there is a question about how much you can mandate. And in all honesty, having been told to do it, the ability to mandate after that became very difficult. Strong leadership and a good SRO is absolutely critical at this early stage. And you're always on the continuum of coercion against cooperation. So we've broken this out into the why and the how. I think what we've found over time is it's ceased to be why and it's starting to become why not, which is actually really critical for us because it shows that the change activities we've undertaken are taking hold. The other thing is clearly the environment has changed and it's very evident that why not at the moment is the thing that needs to be done to protect the science budget. As you start off on the why, there are some really big decisions, if you're going to do it like we did, that you will make at the outset. And they will influence the rest of your programme and basically whether you either hit the cost lines or hit the benefit lines. Be really clear on your scope when you set off. I would say looking back we weren't, and as a result of that we found that scope creep has cost us a lot. If you're going to work with somebody, partner, systems integrator or anything else, remember they're in it for money as well, usually a profit. We learnt that sort of the hard way. It is all about change, as I said earlier. How will you manage the change? If we had spent as much time thinking about how we were going to manage the change as we thought about whether we were going to use Oracle or SAP, we wouldn't have probably got into some of the problems we subsequently did. How much can you afford? And will it deliver the benefits you want? Within the affordability envelope, there are a whole load of other questions that will fall out. How are you going to pay for it? Is it capital, downstream revenue? There are all sorts of recharging mechanisms that will need to be thought of before everybody starts falling out with each other. VAT will play its part. TECL may play its part. These are all things that you need to think about before you set off. There's a little sentence in there, or 2 words, optimism bias. This is a statement that comes from the Treasury. Whatever you think this will cost you, it won't. It will cost more. Whatever you think the benefits are, you will struggle to get there. They have tables which will show you what the optimism bias is, and the NAO are delighted to show you them halfway through your project. Have a plan. It is a good idea. With all the greatest respect to some of our IT colleagues, this is not an IT programme. It is a business programme with a critical component being IT. Make sure that you look at all the business drivers. Oddly, we actually have got our system going live before some of our businesses are ready. The IT bloke's absolutely delighted. The business can't go live because they're not ready. The run rate's about £1 million a month. Something has to close the gap. Have a plan. We've talked about change. You've all seen these models before. I'm not going to dwell on this one in particular. Strong leadership at the beginning, recognising the people that have to go through it, is as important as everything else in the process.